Yeah, this question is about working with discretionary support and resistance lines. So we can see, right, there's a red, blue, and green line drawn here, right? And so these are subjective price locations. So in other words, they're not coming from an indicator. So these lines are subjectively drawn, right? And so the question is, let's see here. This was from Ronnie. Yeah, so this question was from Ronnie, right? And so, who knows? Maybe these lines are coming from a service. I've seen that type of question before, where people have a service that will provide them, with some support resistance lines for the day, and so, or maybe on an hourly basis or something like that. And so you get these values, whether maybe they're coming from yourself or from some service, whatever, right? But they're not indicator based. That's the point, right? These values are not indicator based. So that's kind of part of the question, is how can you build a system with BloodHound where there's no indicator involved that provides the support resistance lines, right? And then the second part of the question is actually building the system here. So what's wanted is this blue line is actually the trading line or the signal line. So what's wanted is, once these support resistance lines are known, we want a signal, and in this case it would be a short signal, when price pulls above the blue line, which is, I guess we'll call it the signal line, and then crosses down. On the crossing down, so this is a screenshot of a short trade here, of an idealistic short trade. All right, so we want to see a signal when price crosses back down below the blue line. And there's a couple of other situations here, right? So if price just goes straight down and hits the target line, then obviously no signal, right? We don't want no more signal for the rest of the day. Or if price just charges right on up and crosses the red line, right, which would be the stop line. So if price crosses that stop line, then no more signal for the rest of the day, right? So price needs to just cross the blue line and stay within the stop line and the signal line. It needs to stay within this area and then cross back down. And then that would be the entry signal. All right. So since these lines are subjective, I was just trying to find something on my chart that looks kind of similar. Yeah, in that I could create something similar here. So yeah, let's do this. So I'm going to use a red, white, and green line here. So I guess this would be kind of an ideal situation here. We're going to get a signal right there when the high of the bar. Let's stretch this out a little bit. There we go. Right. So when price, any part of price. So for this system, we're going to use the high of the bar or the low of the bar. Right. So if price, actually, I think the way this question was phrased is if price touches the signal line, right? So the high wick is touching the signal line. So if the high price crosses that signal line and then comes back down, so actually, sorry, that is not a long. There we go. So there on this bar. So so the high price comes up, crosses the signal line, and then crosses back down, right? So we had a touch of the signal line, and then price will move down, right? And price will move down, and then profit targets hit. So here's an ideal situation. So let's just go with that. And actually, you know what? So to test all the different scenarios here, I'm actually going to have to adjust my lines here. So I'm going to have to create some failures within this system to test the system and make sure it works properly. Right. So remember, if price doesn't cross the signal line just right, then we want this no signals the remainder of the day. So I'm going to have to use multiple days here to create some failure situations. All right, so that. All right, so this would be, right, a failure situation, because let's see here. I better do this. Here, let's move the signal line up a little higher. There we go. Perfect. Actually, I'll use this as, yeah, just to kind of keep things simple here. So there we go. So we have two failures here, right? So I can just move my target line, you know, up or down, right, to make a failure, you know, on the target line, or I can make a failure on the stop line there. Yeah, so that's kind of ideal to create, yeah, two failure lines, two failed situations there. Okay, cool. And I'll see if I can find something, a situation for a long signal. That just works out to be an ideal long situation. All right, so I can use this area to create a failed long situation. You know, just saying price never got down to the signal line and then hit the profit target or hit the target line. I think I'm ready to go here. So, you know, there's one thing here that hasn't been mentioned yet and is very critical to this, right? When you're, you know, when you have an indicator, you know, trying to find basically patterns, right? Price patterns, or you're building a system, right? That's generating trade signals. Sometimes, you know, like this is a perfect example, right? There are situations where especially when it's very discretionary, you know, again, so this being a discretionary system here, right? So picking these three support resistance lines, right? They're very discretionary. And so a narrow time frame that's involved here. So with this, you know, screenshot here, right? Basically these support resistance lines don't apply to any of the history on this chart, right? These support resistance lines only apply to this period of time that we see, right? So all the bars prior to what we see here should all be ignored, right? And of course, that is something that systems do not do, right? So saying that, you know, I want my start time, you know, my time for looking for this ideal pattern starts now, right? And that is atypical. So that will be something very unique to this, right? So when we design this, we don't want to see any signals prior to this time, right? We don't want to see any historical signals, right? Because these support resistance lines do not apply to any of the past data, right? Any of the past bars. So, you know, when we build this system, you know, a critical component is to say, you know, is to have a starting time, right? So we're going to say, okay, from this time of day forward, you know, we can look for a signal, right? Or the signal fails. So let's put, you know, put a couple of lines on here to identify, you know, when the start time would be, something like that, right? So we have a starting time at which the support resistance lines are known, right? So prior to, you know, the start time, right, those support resistance levels haven't developed yet. So therefore, you know, if we're on this day, right, these support resistance lines are only valid, you know, from this period of time on. And so they're not valid for anything in the past. So we need a starting time, you know, that tells BloodHound when it's valid here. And then, how to phrase this? And then, you know, when we have a start time, you know, if the pattern fails, right? So for example, here where my triangles are, right, the patterns fail, we want to make sure that it's not possible to get a signal anymore throughout the remainder of the day. Right, so for example here, yeah, this is probably, I'm guessing, the more typical situation where price comes down and hits the stop line. Price will, I'm going to guess that probably, yeah, what's probably the typical failure is price overextends and hits the stop line and therefore fails the pattern. But as we can see throughout the day, well, price will probably come and cross the signal line at some point, right? And so we want to make sure that there's no signals, as price does actually kind of come back to the signal line and cross it, and so therefore we don't want any signals after that point. Yeah, so the point being is, once we get a failure, we'll block any signals, any further signals from generating from basically, that point on. Well, at least that point until the next day, I should say, until the next day. All right, so to kind of break this idea down, to break this trading system down here, right? If price, again, to repeat, if price touches the stop line, before crossing the signal line again, that's a failure. Same thing if price just runs up and hits the target line, before crossing the signal line, again, a failure, right? So we need to kind of identify these failures so that if we do get a failure, that we can prevent signals afterwards, right? So like, again, right here, we can see that price comes down and then crosses back above the signal line, right? Price is just, kind of dancing around here for the remainder of the day. So, so we need to build some logic to identify these two failures, right? So identify the stop line being touched as a failure or the target line being touched as a failure prior, right? And this happening prior to price crossing the signal line here. So the way I'm going to approach this, right? So basically the raw conditions are very simple, right? If price crosses the stop line, failure. Ideally, we want price to cross the signal line. So, all right, so we're generating a crossover signal, basically. But then also, if price crosses the target line earlier, then failure. Right, so these are all just simple crossover conditions, but it's combining them together with logic that makes the system work. Right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use toggle nodes here. So I'm going to need a couple of toggle nodes here. Right. And so these toggle nodes will be in a on state. The toggle nodes will start in a on state here, right? So we have a starting state, and I can turn that on. Actually, no, hold on. Sorry, I'm going to turn the toggle nodes on, using a different method. Sorry. So what's going to happen is when we hit this start time, when this start time occurs, right? So remember the vertical lines are representing the starting time at which our support resistance lines are known, and that's when we're looking for this, price crossing the signal line to generate. So this starting time is what's going to turn our toggle nodes on. And so as long as the toggle nodes are on, then when price crosses the signal line, then the signal can come through. But if price comes down and hits the stop line, I'm going to use that, price hitting the stop line or crossing the stop line to turn one of the toggle nodes off. And so if any one of these toggle nodes is turned off, then that will block the signal line crossover, right? So that'll block the actual trade signal by turning a toggle node off, right? If price hits the stop line first, or if price hits the target line first, then that'll turn the toggle node off, and therefore no signal would be able to get through, right? So to kind of understand the concept here, we're kind of going in a backwards direction, right? So we're going to take, I'll move these down here, right? So we're going to have toggle nodes going into an AND node, right? So both of these toggle nodes need to remain in a on state in order for a signal to get through the AND node. Right, and so again, if price touches the stop line or touches the target line, that'll turn these toggle nodes off. So, I can name these as well. There. Right. So basically these toggle nodes are identifying that the stop line hasn't been hit yet, so things are okay, and the target line hasn't been hit, so things are okay. All right, so let's grab a couple of crossovers here. And so, as kind of like earlier, as I explained earlier in the question, we have to decide, what price is valid, for a signal or to invalidate a signal, right? So, which of these prices would truly, which price hitting the stop line really invalidates the signal. And so in this case, I'm pretty sure that Ronnie said, yeah, if any part of price touches the stop line or touches the profit target line, then that would invalidate it, right? So if we're looking for a long signal, yeah, right. So this is set up for looking for a long trade here where we have the target above and a stop below. So we'll use the low price to identify price touching the stop line for a long. So the low is going to be used for a long. So let's go to input A, change to price. And so for a long, we are using the low price. And so if we were looking for a short for the day, we would be using the high price. There we go. We'd be using the high price there. All right, and now input B, that's going to be our discretionary stop line value here. All right, I guess I'll just call this the stop line. And let's see, I need to put a value in there. So let's see, 52.32. And okay, there we go. So when the low of the bar crosses our stop line value, so remember, since this is a discretionary system, we're having to manually type in our stop line value, our signal line value, and our target line value. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this long signal here, right, to turn the toggle node off. And let's see, I'm also going to use a long short modifier here. And let's see. We're going to use the addition mode, because what I want to do is, I want to generate a long and short signal from this, because the toggle node, the toggle node need to have the long and short outputs turned on. And so therefore, when I get this crossover, I want a long and short signal to occur to turn the toggle node completely off, right? I want to turn the long output and the short output off within the toggle node. And so let's see here. There. I prefer to rename my long short modifiers to whatever mode they are doing. All right, let's pull that back there. Now again, I am definitely kind of doing this in a reverse fashion here, just because of the, I guess, yeah, unique nature of this question here. But so what we did, right, is we created these signals that invalidate the setup, right, invalidate the trade here. And so these signals are being used to turn the toggle node off, right? So they're going to go into the reset so that we can turn the toggle node off. So in the reset here, we're using the reset, right? We're using a signal going into the reset to turn the toggle node off. So there we go. So on signal and on an opposite signal, we're turning the toggle node off. So now we need something that turns the toggle node on, right? And so remember, it's the starting time of day that's chosen. The starting time is what will be used to turn the toggle nodes on, right? So with the toggle nodes on at this starting time, then that would allow a trade signal to get through unless, of course, a stop line gets hit or a target line gets hit first. So let's create the condition that identifies the start time of day. So let's see, this is 1:30 in the morning. Okay. All right. So I'm going to use a threshold solver, and let's call this start time. And I'm going to use a little helper indicator. So in Shark Indicators and inside the tool folder, we open up tools, we'll see there's a time block indicator. So this time block indicator can do multiple things here. It can identify multiple situations with time. So obviously it can identify a block of time, but it can identify a starting time or a ending time, right? A before time period, a between times, right? So yeah, so this indicator is basically here as a helper when needing to identify blocks of time or a specific time of day, is a part of the system. Right? So to make this work, I'm going to take the beginning time here and make this 1:30, right? So as I identified, my start time on the chart was 1:30. And so I want to identify the start bar, right? So the starting bar is when the time begins. Right? So this is going to identify the bar that closes at 1:30. So let's click OK. And then for the outputs, like so, let's close this up. Oh. Here, let's connect that in. There we go. And so now, right, we can see the bar. Actually, we should probably stretch this out a little bit more. So there, actually, not probably. Well, again, this is subjective, but probably, maybe the 145 bar might have been a little better, but what the heck. Let's just go in there and adjust that time real fast. All right, so there we go, 145. And there we go. So now we're identifying the bar here, right, that I marked with my line. So basically, right, this starting time says, we have established support resistance line. And so at this point on, we can now look for the setup pattern. All right, we can look for the trade pattern. And so we're using, right, the signal, right, that's coming from our threshold solver and our time block indicator. We're using that to turn the toggle nodes on, right? So there, yeah. Yeah, that should do it. Let's see here. Let's take a look, right? So we are looking at our toggle node, right? That's checking to see whether the stop line is okay or not. So here we go, right? So we turn the toggle node on our start bar, and then price comes down, and then when price hits our stop line, let's get this out of the way, right? So we can see this long wick here. Price came down and it hit our stop line, and that invalidated the trade setup. And so our toggle node turns off, right? So again, if one of our toggle node gets turned off, then that will invalidate price crossing our signal line. All right, so we have our system set up to identify if the stop line gets hit first. So now we can just take this. We can basically take these two nodes and do the same thing for our target line, right? So remember, we got a toggle node for the target line. So let's grab another crossover, put it back here, and there, let's plug that in. And so this will be our target line. And again, input B, that's going to be our target support resistance line value, right? So let's figure out what that is. That is 53.22. So let's put 53.22. There we go. And so the price is, so now we need to figure out, okay, what price, which price hitting the target line first, right, invalidates the signal. And let's see, yeah, this would have been a long signal situation. Yeah, a long signal situation. And so the high of the bar. So if the high of the bar touches our target line before getting us a signal from the signal line, then the high would invalidate for a long. So for the input A, for a long signal, we're using the high price. And for short, we're using the low price. And let's see, our other crossover solver here. Yeah, we used crosses against. So, actually, no, that's right. This one will use crosses in direction. So there we go. So we had a long signal once price crossed our target line value. And so again, we need another long short modifier node. And we're going to use addition mode. And so now, right, from this logic here, we're now getting a long and a short output here. And so this long and short output can then turn off our toggle node there. All right, so we're looking at the toggle node for the target line. Right, we zoom in here a little bit. There. Right, so there we go. So on the start bar, right, when the pattern is valid and we're starting to look for the setup, so we can see the toggle node turns on, and then let's see here. See here. So I did not adjust my resets for the target toggle node. So resets here. Let's set this to force off and force off. There we go. All right. Yeah. So when price hits the target line, if it hits that target line first, then that would invalidate the signal here. Right. So now, so looking at this AND node, right? If price hits the stop line first, the toggle nodes are turned off. And so with the toggle nodes off, no signal, right? No signal from the signal line can get through. Okay, let's see. So the last component now is setting up the signal line. Yeah, setting up the signal line. Now this is a crossover condition here, but yeah, the one thing I didn't consider, and I'm just realizing it kind of now, is how to identify whether we're looking for a long trade during the day or a short trade during the day. Well, let's see. Yeah, well, let me just take this one step at a time here. So I'm just going to grab another crossover solver. And right, so again, this crossover solver is going to be just like, right, just like the target line and the stop line crossover solver. And this one will be for the right, the signal line. And again, I believe Ronnie will accept any price hitting the signal line. So let's go back here. Yeah, here we go. So here is kind of my artificially created ideal situation here. So I believe Ronnie said that if any part of price, right, touches that signal line, then that's fine. And actually, let me pause for a moment here and just, I should double check here. All right. Yeah, there was a lot of back and forth with this email here. Finding what I'm looking for. All right, so I'm going to make this a little more conservative. So I'm gonna set up the signal line requirement requiring the closing price, which we already have here, right? We have the closing price. So I'm going to require the closing price of the bar to actually cross the signal line there. So let's see, that's 51.67 or 76, sorry. There. So, all right, with the general crossover solver, right, we can see that we're getting long and short crossovers here. So we need a way to filter out the actual trade signal, right? So basically, this crossover solver is responsible for creating the actual trade signal of price crossing the signal line. And so in this situation, right, since our target is above, this would be looking for a long today. So, yeah, all right. So I guess there's another adjustment that will need to be made for the day, which is the evaluate here. So I will just have to say long only, right? So we're going to evaluate long only signals, right, when our support resistance lines are looking for a long, setup, right, a long trade setup. Yeah. So there we go. So we're going to, so the signal line, basically the signal line crossover solver requires two inputs, right? The evaluate, right, to determine whether you're looking for a long signal or a short signal for the day. And then, of course, the signal line value. All right, and so that gets plugged into there. All right. Now, probably should do some adjustments here. There. All right, so it'd be handy to have, right, all of our solvers kind of in one centralized spot here to quickly get to them. And connect that up like that. There. All right, so the way this would work, right, is you have your solvers here in one spot. So once you have these discretionary support resistance lines figured out, right, I can go in here. And set up my signal line. 5170, yeah. All right, next my target line. Let's see, 5280. So let's select the target line and let's see, what was it again? That was 5280. And then go down to the stop line. That's 5150. And then the time of day. All right, and let's see, the time of day here is 9:30. So time of day, we need to go into the time block indicator. And 9:30. 9:30 there. All right, and there are our trade signals. So, right. And so let's kind of take a look at our toggle nodes, right? So if we look at the target line, right? So we're looking at the target line toggle node, right? We can see the toggle node turns on at our start time. And then once that target is hit, it turns off. So, right, perfect. The stop line, right, if we look at the stop line, the stop is never hit. So that toggle node is just left on, right? It's just left on. So, but, right, so again, remember the trade signals, right, the trade signals are happening here. So let's go back to the target line node, right? So remember the target line toggle node turns off back here, but we get the signal way before that happens. So yeah, I just wanted to point out, right, that turning the toggle node off here is fine because we had already generated the trade signal, back here. Right. Let's look at that again. Right, there we go. Yeah, so as soon as either the target line gets hit or the stop line gets hit, then no more signals will occur until. So we got to remember that. Here, let's zoom in here. So let's make sure that everybody understands that, right? Our start time, right? So remember our start time solver, that's right, generating the long and short output here to, right? And this is what turns the toggle nodes on. So remember that happens every day, right? So we had one back here. We have one on the following day, right? So, so if we look, right, so we had signals, and then the signals are going to be blocked until 9:30 the next day. So you just got to keep that in mind, right? So the signals don't turn off permanently because, right, again, let's take a look at our time block indicator, right? Our time block indicator is turning those toggle nodes back on every day at 9:30, right? So whatever, let's go back into the indicator, right? So whatever our beginning time is set to, those toggle nodes will be turned back on at that time every day. All right, so just something to keep in mind. Right. Yeah, so we can see here on the next day, right, on the next day here, the toggle nodes are turned back on. And we did actually happen to get a signal just after 9:30. Yeah, because the toggle nodes were turned back on. And more importantly, of course, right, if we take our signal line and extend it forward, right, to the next day, yeah, sure, we can see price just happened to be at the signal line value again. And so we got a signal on the next day because the toggle nodes were turned back on, right, because 9:30 occurred. So just keep that in mind, that right, that the toggle nodes will prevent trade signals until the start time occurs again the next day, right? So I'm sure that makes sense. All right, so that is it for this one.